Okay, Yitzi, thank you very much for coming here on the show. I really appreciate it. You are one of the guys I follow on Facebook. You have a lot of really interesting insights into Judaism. You're a rabbi in Copenhagen, isn't that right?
That's right.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. So the what we're going to discuss today is first, the concept of being a mensch, and then maybe delve into other subjects. But the reason why I wanted to discuss the subject of being a mensch is because I think that's one of the anchors on really what it is to be a good person, right? And it has this humanistic content as well. But I mean, you probably have a really deep understanding what it is to be a mensch. So maybe you want to comment on this.
Right. Well, so there's an interesting question, which is can a person be a good person if you're not a religious person? And within Judaism, we have our interaction between the human being and God, and between the human being and the world around them, humanity. So, in fact, there's a very beautiful saying in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, which says the world stands on three things. And I've heard a nice explanation that says that there need to be three important things in life, right? Just like in life in general, we need balance, right? If a person says, all I'm worried about is I'm going to be doing exercise all day, but I'm not going to speak nicely to people, or the person says, I'm only going to be nice to people, but I'm not going to take care of my own body, or so you need to have balance. You need to have all of the various things combined. So the three things that are important in a person's life is the person's relationship with himself, the person's relationship with God, and the person's relationship with humanity, with the world around them. And the person that says, I just relate to the world around me, but I don't care about you, myself, or just myself, but not the world around me, or just God, but not the world around me, or just God, but not myself, is missing a fundamental and important part of who the person is.
Uh,
That said,
hmm.
within the Torah, we actually have descriptions of people who they got on very well with each other, but they didn't get on very well with heaven. And over there, the Bible says they were not so terrible. That at least they got on with each other. There were other people who were not able to get on with each other, and over there, the Torah views that as being a very severe and serious thing. So I'm not able to say, can one be a good person without being a religious person? But you can definitely. It's a good step to be a good person, which means to good person to people around you, even if one does not have faith in God. And one of the things is when we look at a person around us and we have faith in them, which means that we're caring for humanity because they're humanity, we are in a sense caring for God because it's every person has a little spark of godliness
Definitely.
inside of them.
Yitzi, can I
And
maybe I can
yeah,
challenge your points here, maybe?
sure.
Yeah. It's just, and I agree that of course there is this thing as balance, which is very important between the different kind of layers of your life and your relation to God. But I think being a mensch is also a very practical thing, right? How do you do it, right? It's not only the theoretical, I mean, ethics is theory, right? But it's also being practically in a way that you are, a good person, like being nice, being true, being honest. And I just wanted to share a principle for you. Maybe you can reflect on it. Plato says that truth, goodness, and beauty is actually the same, right? And Mensch is a humanistic idea. Uh, and my question is, if we do not do beautiful acts, are they? Do we then? Don't we then also do not do good acts?
Right. I mean, Plato's approach, which is that beauty and goodness are one thing, is an interesting idea because sometimes it's not. And I think that that's what being a mensch means, that you recognize that when doing the good thing is not necessarily the beautiful thing, and you still go ahead and do it, that's what takes a mensch, right? So what's the difference between a mensch? Everybody, if they see a person falling down on the street, they're going to help the person. So, but now comes the question, what happens when it's difficult for me to do
Exactly.
it?
Yeah.
Do I push myself? And the interesting thing in life that anything that is meaningful requires a person to push of themselves. relationships, marriage, a spousal relationship, unless you're married to an angel. Children requires to push yourself. Your work requires you to push yourself. Your faith requires you to push yourself. Your relationship with humanity requires you to push yourself. If you only are doing these things inside your comfort zone, then you haven't taken that step.
That's
And
true.
being a mensch means that you have to sometimes go out of your comfort zone. And that's an important element. Hopefully, you're not required to go out of your comfort zone the whole time. If you're required to go out of the comfort zone your whole time, maybe you're a firefighter or something like that. But a regular person isn't required to go out of the comfort zone the whole time. But the fact is, from time to time, you have to go out of your comfort zone. And one has to be self-reflective enough to be able to say that, you know what, this is the fact that I'm going out of my comfort zone. This is an opportunity for me. And it's an opportunity to take a step further than I'm perhaps comfortable with.
I think this discussion may connect to the discussion about sacrifice, right? Because I think that one of the things that we really lack in this day and age is to sacrifice ourselves, right? Being within your comfort zone is also doing things that you're not actually giving yourself of anything if you do not sacrifice yourself. And I've got good friends called David. He says that sacrifice and love is actually something that really is connected, in the sense that if you do not sacrifice yourselves for the people you love, the amount of love will be less. And if you're kind of being too egoistic and selfish in your relationship to a person, then they stop love you, right? I have 2 kids, and I've sacrificed myself a lot for them, and I can feel that the connection I have with them is better, and also with my friends. So maybe sacrifice is also kind of a reflection on going out of your comfort zone, because sacrifice is giving something of yourself that you rather keep yourself, right? Something that you prefer having yourself, but giving it to people that you like because it's important and they need it. Does that make sense?
Right. The thing is that the term sacrifice is a dramatic term, because I've sacrificed my hobby for this. The most dramatic is, of course, a person sacrificing their life. A lot of times when we're demanded to go out of our comfort zone, it's not necessarily a sacrifice, and on the contrary, it actually makes us into a better person, a kinder person, a nicer person. It develops us, so it's not really a sacrifice. So me going to the gym is not really a sacrifice. It's just committing myself to do something which is outside of my comfort zone. If I stop doing something else that I like because I go to the gym, or because I'm with my kids, or because I'm with my spouse, whatever it might be, so that would be a sacrifice. So you're right. The border between going out of your comfort zone and sacrifice can be a thin border. I agree with that. But not every time that you go out of your comfort zone is that, oh, I've just sacrificed. You know what? I took my kid to the ball game. I sacrificed. You didn't sacrifice. You were a father. That's the normal thing that you're supposed to do. Calm down. Don't get so excited about yourself because you spent a few minutes doing what you were supposed to do. Right. So I think, we don't have to switch immediately from comfort zone to sacrifice. There's comfort zone. There's outside of your comfort zone. There's uncomfortable, difficult, challenging, sacrifice.
Maybe it's kind of a level thing.
Yeah, it's a level thing, and if you have to sacrifice every day, you might be in the wrong environment.
True. That,
hopefully you're bringing the different elements that they're jiving together. I mean, listen, there are people that are in difficult situations. A person with a child that is different, a person that is with a spouse, that they do have to put themselves aside. And you do see spouses, especially in older age, and parents of children with difficult situations, that they are sacrificing, and that is correct, and that is very inspiring. It's painful to watch, but that is something that does sometimes have to be done. But for many of us, it's not necessarily about sacrifice, but it should be about going out of our comfort zone. And I think as adults, we don't like other people to shatter our stability. This is who I am, this is what I am, don't change me. But our kids, and hopefully our spouse, and maybe some other elements in our life, have the ability to do that. And therefore we should welcome that when they challenge us. and when they take a next dimension from us. And I think and bring us to the next dimension. I think that that's important. At least the thing that I find, you're not necessarily somebody else says something, you're not necessarily able to listen to them. When your child says something, you listen in a better way, I think.
I think being a mensch is also, you see people sometimes and you think, oh, this guy, he's a mensch, right? Do you have like you live in a world full of rabbis and people who are doing these things day to day? I mean, do you have like an example on a mensch that you kind of would say, this guy, he's a mensch, right? Because everyone wants to be a mensch, but do you have like an example of that?
Definitely. I mean, to say his name or his or her name is not necessarily the relevant issue if you're not familiar with them. But there are people, including people that are very close to me, that I say, wow, this person is a mensch. This person is willing to push themselves and push their comfort zone beyond what I would feel comfortable, and they're able to do it in a pleasant and kind fashion. Um, and it can express, every single person is so different. So it can express itself in so many ways. And what for one person is totally natural, for another person is really beyond their comfort zone. And in so many areas I see it. And one of the ways I see it is, as a rabbi, so various people approach me for help. And so what I need to do is I need to approach other people to ask them for help for this person. Last week I had somebody who needed a job. And I have a friend who has a company. And if I call him and I say, give this person a job, more times than not, they'll say, yeah, send them over. And they don't even ask what they can do. It's like,
Jewish,
I
yeah.
think there are other members of the leadership of the company that are like, what's this person doing? Oh, the rabbi sent them. How did the rabbi become our business advisor? you know and so it's just like the person is like, I have a business, I'm able to help somebody, I go ahead and do it. And that to me is mensch. But you don't have to own a big business in order to be able to be a mensch. There is so many different ways of people that do that extra step, people that have difficulties and challenges, and we match them up together with somebody who helps them out and cares for them. These are all examples of mensches that we see in so many different ways.
Do you,
Um,
do you think
and
that
and one of the ways, a good friend is a good friend, and that's a beautiful thing. But this is also people that are acting to strangers, not necessarily people that they know, or not even necessarily people that they like. Not all people are as likable as other people, right? Some people are managed to make themselves a little bit difficult, but they are able to, in a sense, push themselves and go outside of their comfort zone, and that's a very beautiful thing.
It is. I think one of the contents of being a mensch perhaps is also, if it has this humanistic background, one of the things that's really important for the humanist is truth, right? Sharing the truth and being a light bringer and all these things. I think this is a difficult thing, right? Being true, because sometimes when you are too much true, right? When you push the truth into the faces of other people and tell them maybe things that I don't really like, then it's actually cruel. It can be pretty cruel, right? But if you do it in a manner which is more, soft and pleasant and respectful, maybe it's important to tell people some things, truth sometimes, with respect, of course. But I think truth is one of the things that is, to my mind, is very difficult to really work with, because it can be very destructive, but it's also sometimes very important that we tell people some kinds of truth, right? You're doing things that I wouldn't do because I think it's harmful for others and stuff like that. Have you thought about that ever, about truth and how you actually really work with it?
So Plato saying good and beauty and truth are all one thing. I disagree, I'm sorry to say. In fact, in Judaism, there's a concept that emet and shalom, which is truth and peace, can actually be contradictory. Because if I tell you the truth, which starts with good morning, how are you? I'm doing terrible. And how do I look? You're looking terrible. You put on weight. And what do you think about me? I think you're terrible, right? So we don't walk around telling the truth. And on the contrary, I think we have to hold back from the truth sometimes. There's another thing that obviously, it might be something to do with age, but as a younger person, I'm very convinced this is right. I got to tell you, I'll tell it to you in a nice way. I've had this situation
Idealistic.
of idealistic, but me being very sincere. But then with life's experience, actually seeing that what I thought was very true was actually not true. I can think of two examples. I can think of, we often have boys and girls meet each other, men and women, and they go on a date, and some of the dates we help them arrange, and then sometimes I watch, because there are people that like wander, they're around the Chabad house, and I watch the date going on, and then I've had like a couple of times where I've said that match is a bad idea. They are too different. Their background are too different, and there's a couple that I know that I will tell you that I worked very hard to split them up, and I was not successful. And they have a beautiful, wonderful family of children. And when I go to them, we joke. I said, "This is a shidduch I tried hard to prevent." But then there are others who I've also tried to break up without success, and I can see they're living in pain. That it did. It was a match that didn't really work. And then
Yeah.
there are others that I tried hard to bring together, and they did come to. So I'm old enough to be able to say what I think is very true is not necessarily reality. I can
True. Yeah,
have a
that's
very
really the
firm
thing.
opinion, and something I can think is terrible and it's not so bad, and something I can think is not so bad and it's actually terrible. We're not prophets. We see to the best of our ability, we evaluate to the best of our ability. Whether or not we're actually able to be precise is a good question. So one of the things we have to be ever so slightly subtly reflective. I can think that something is very true for me. I can think is very true for the other person. One has to preserve the other person's self-dignity. One has to preserve the other's autonomy. And of course, remember that it's not necessarily, is it by saying something direct and straight, is that's the best way to get the person to do it. Especially if you want somebody to do something, you've got to be smart, not just right? So it's not just about saying, I think that's a terrible idea what you're doing. It's saying, well, I think maybe you should rethink it. Maybe you should, because somebody coming to the solution on their own makes it that it's theirs.
That's true.
And there's obviously another element, which is that we cannot take responsibility for another person's life and another person's situation. So we have to help to guide them, to encourage them, to try that they should seek advice, but ultimately it's their decision. And ultimately it's their mistake to make, and it's their success to
That's
create.
true. I have a bit of the same experience as you have. You maybe, when I was younger, I was kind of a firebrand. I really thought and I probably was, changing the world, right? But
Right.
I think with age, you realize that you have to be, have to be humble about your own, values and your own forces and so on and so forth. Because what can happen, especially if you are a philosopher, is that the things that you do will actually change a lot of people's lives, right? And if you're not really careful about it, it actually may change people's lives in a negative direction. So your reflection as a person, as a being a political philosopher, is so important. And the more I grow older, the more I realize I have to be humble about it. I have to be humble about my own skills, my own my own impact on the world. Because if I'm not, then it might actually be really dangerous, right, for other people, to if I really change their lives. And yeah, I think that's also kind of a progress of a person, right? When you're young, you're idealistic. When you get old, you may be a bit more humble. And I think that the impact you have when you're older is actually much milder, but also actually it brings the world into a much better place. So
Yeah.
I wanted
One
to
of
ask.
the differences between power and influence, right? So power, you can micromanage something. Influence, you can have a bigger effect.
Exactly, yeah. By being, if, you can be idealistic, and the ideals that you push out there, right? People, they follow it. They think, oh, he's a leader of idealism, And the thing is that when you do that, often you actually pull people in a direction that you often do not really know where that direction it really is. And then after some years, after some time, you look back and say, "Oh my God, I pushed these people into a corner, and they, now they're really in trouble, right?" And it actually had a very negative influence on their own lives. And it's also another thing about age. Maybe you have reflected. I don't know. When I was younger, I was really into fighting for my ideas, and I also often fought other people. And one of the things I really regret today is that the people I fought at that time, they really had it rough, right? And the infliction I had on their lives, I really regret it. That's also one of the things about being young and idealistic. You actually hurt people sometimes, right? And hurting people, you will regret that afterwards, because you can see their lives being less successful than it would otherwise have been. Do you have any experience on this?
Well, I mean, obviously you make mistakes throughout life, and where you can, go back and try to patch them up and fix them up. And I think one of the things about humility, or as the fellow said, when I'm as great as myself, it's not so easy being humble. No, but the one of the things about humility is that it's not obviously not about you. And this is an important element to remember, again, in these important areas in our life, which is our relationships with our spouse, with our parents, with our children, with our siblings, our relationship with the world around us, our relationship with what we do, and all of these. Instead of us focusing on what's my position over here, it's focusing in what am I needed for, what should I be doing, how can I make the situation better. And I'm sure if you have some sort of a party or an event or a situation, there's always a couple of people who you realize that one has to be very careful about how they're positioned, and they're people who it's very much about them, whereas the vast majority of people, it's not about them. It's about doing what's needed, doing what's the best thing. I was talking to somebody yesterday about, they were organizing an event, and they said, I want to give these 6 people in order to speak. And I said, your event is not about these 6 people. Your event is about making the best event possible. If these 6 people help you, use them. If they don't, drop them. So in that sense, the idea of recognizing that, as I think it was John F. Kennedy, ask not what America can do for you, but what you can do for America. And in that sense, when we're in a situation, asking, what can I do? What should I do? What can I do? How do I make this situation a better situation? And
Giving
you could
instead of
say that's, if you want to ask what is the distinguishing qualities of a mensch, right? So you want to, what is a mensch? How you describe a mensch? So when you started, we're talking about a mensch. I'm like, I don't know what a mensch. A mensch is a mensch. What's a mensch? But now we're talking about it. I'll say a mensch is these 2 qualities: willing to go out of their comfort zone, and it's not about them, right? And I think those 2 qualities will cause that a person to be a mensch. Maybe if we talk further, we'll discover a 3rd quality. So
yeah, I think one of the experiences I've had is that I've been really working a lot with social problems. So I've been in situations where people are really in dark places, really dark places, where people are subject to all kinds of humiliations and this and that. It's really difficult things. And I think what I really realized was also the dramatic, there's a drama between good and bad, right? Like if you take the Shoah, right? That was ultimate evil, essentially. And I think one of the things that there is a drama to the world. There is something which is ultimately evil. And I think also, if you kind of put that around, right, you can also say there's something which is ultimately good. Just as there are things that are so evil and so degrading and so tyrannical and difficult, I think I've seen people going out there who are beautiful and good persons and doing things that are really good for the just not for them, for the world and as such. So I think there is a kind of and I think maybe that's a Jewish thing also, because we are always challenged on our where we are, and maybe sometimes we have to flee, and there's problems always. This contrast often gets us, right? When we go after going through the Holocaust. I mean, people who came out of that Holocaust were the most beautiful and wonderful people, because they had to fight and see this evil. I think There is something about their
although
consciousness.
greatly traumatized.
Yeah,
Although, I mean, that's one of the complexities, is that you are right that it's made them a tougher person, and many of them went on to lead successful lives. But at the same time, they were greatly traumatized, and they had difficulties as spouses and as parents, and
I
talking.
know.
They did therapy, so it's
Yeah, we actually are talking about Holocaust, which is, I think, as you said, is a very, isn't is it's a difficult subject for many Jews, right? And as you said, there are many Jews have been highly traumatized by the event. And I said that I that's absolutely true. But I think also some of the people who got out of the Holocaust are with their traumas also people who are just amazing. I've heard so many stories about people surviving and getting alive and going on as persons, right? I think going through such a thing is I think it's must be very difficult, but they still managed, right? And made a family, brought up children that they actually had well working lives, right? I think doing that on such a background must, I mean, that's a heroic in my view, right? And how did they do it, right? That's really the question, I think. Do you have any thoughts on that? What made them actually make a good life after such a traumatic event?
Well, obviously, going through such a terrible event could destroy a person, or a person can take out certain lessons from it, which many of them did, taking out what's important in life and what's not important in life. And that's, I mean, nowadays there aren't many of them still alive, but definitely, when I at a younger point, speaking to somebody that had gone through that and hearing their life's perspective and their life attitude. And for many of them, their life's perspective and their life attitude was unique because they'd undergone such terrible trauma and loss and tragedy that they came out with a perspective that was, that was truly valuable, and at the same time truly positive, which means, there's a book written by a man who survived Auschwitz called The Happiest Man Alive. And he decided he wants to be the happiest person, and he, focused on the fact that he survived it. And let's imagine, going back, they were going through, these years of suffering and trauma, and they always said to themselves, okay, if I'll make it, everything will be great. And that's the perspective that we get. This is the perspective that we do not have, because we hurt our finger and that's the end of the world, right? They had lost a tremendous amount and still able to go forward. I remember we had a man, he survived Sobibor, the death camp. He was part of the revolt. There's a YouTube film about it, Escape from Sobibor, and he was part of it. And he came and he told us his story. And then I remember, for me, the most remarkable part of it was that at the end of the story, he sang a song in Yiddish, and everybody was singing with him. And I remember somebody afterwards, remarking, "Here's a man. He lost his family. He lost his parents. I think one of his siblings survived, and he went through this terrible situation. And when he gets up, he's still able to sing a song at the end." And that being able to sing a song at the end, but really recognizing that life is about being present, is about being positive, is about being happy in the here and now. And that's something that these people are able to teach us in a tremendous way.
Yeah, I think it's really true. My great grandmother, she also fled from the Nazis in the Second World War. I think her story is also it's actually, it links a bit back to the whole story about idealism, right? She was very idealistic, and she really fought the Nazis actually. And then she had to she was quite old at the time, and then she had to flee with these small fishing boats that went from
Right.
Denmark to Sweden. And I think one of the things that really impressed me about her, she was an idealist. At that time she was old actually. She was still an idealist, still fighting for good. And what she did was she held a lot of speeches against Germany at that time. And then then she had to flee, right? She had to go to Sweden. But then when she came to Sweden, she continued, over in Sweden to, to talk about it and discuss it and being, I mean, it's just that, just imagine, right? Such an old lady just going on and on and on. She meets this, I think most people at that time, they kind of they didn't want to go up against this whole machine of Germany and Nazi occupation.
Right.
Probably because it was so difficult and dangerous, she just kept on and on. And then
Wow.
she never stopped. And I think persons like that, it requires strength, right? She was a very, very strong person, I think, in her convictions and also in her belief in what was right and wrong. And there was that whole generation. Also Herbert Pundig, he also, sorry, not Herbert Pundig, Paul Henningsen, he had to flee as well. He was also, you can discuss him, but no, he just kept on going on. She was in the same generation. So this thing about tenacity in life, I think, is also important, that you should be able, it's very important that you don't give up, right? I think people who came out of the Holocaust were the ones who didn't give up, who actually kept going, right? And didn't fall to the oppression and the ridicule. I think that's also maybe a lesson you can learn from that event, or not event, but that terrible thing.
Great. Yeah. And there were many people that pushed themselves to save others when they didn't have to, and that's truly a remarkable story, and that's something that our society today could take some lessons from. People willing to put themselves at risk for another person. That's something truly remarkable. I don't know if that's the qualities of a Mensch, because I don't know if you have to say that a Mensch has to be willing to sacrifice their life for somebody else, but that's the qualities of an extraordinary Mensch. So people that are willing to put their lives on the line for somebody else. That's a remarkable story.
Yeah, and it's also
done with a simple by many of them.
Please. Yeah, I think it's also a matter maybe of what kind of time you live in, right? Because right now there's peace, mostly in Denmark, has been for some time, while as in the occupation, of course, there was not peace and there was war, and then it brings out different qualities in each person, right? When you're in a situation where the oppression really gets hard. I mean, imagine how it was in living in Poland or Lithuania and stuff like that. I mean, what must have been horrible, right? And that extraordinary thing, it's needed in time of peril, right? As right now it's not so difficult. We still have the ability to talk to each other and reach people in dialogue and so on and so forth. Maybe as a closing comment, Yitzi, you've been really doing a lot of outreach, and what's your take on some of these problems that's do you believe in dialogue and talking to other people and reaching understanding? What's your take on that and some of these issues?
Some situations that's helpful, but unfortunately some situations are beyond dialogue, but there are situations that dialogue is definitely helpful in creating understanding and dialogue between people, where it's possible, where it's necessary, and where it's useful is a good idea. Where it's just being used as a path for people to do what they want and say, oh, I'm in dialogue with somebody, that one has to, so sometimes one has to be wary. One has to go into it with one's eyes open. You can't go into it as if, oh, everything can be solved with dialogue, but a lot of things can be. But sure. This is a whole nother discussion about fundamentalism and so forth. At what point do we say dialogue is beneficial? At what point do we say this is not something that we can help and they have to stand on their own? And we have to just, as a society, deal with them in the correct way. So it's I'm not. Yeah, it is not a simple thing. Meaning the idea of dialogue is a beautiful and important idea. The practicalities of it is one has to be aware when it's being used in a negative way. When it
can be an excuse for not actually protecting people and
that is that's a terrible
that when it gets to that. Yeah. All right, Yitzi, I think we kind of touched upon the subject in a beautiful way. I hope you feel that we did it in a respectful way also for the
Fantastic.
idea.
Yeah.
And hopefully our listeners and viewers can see this as something that will maybe lift them in their lives and also maybe contribute to their, understanding.